Welcome, I'm Sharon Anderson, President of Leiomyosarcoma Support and Direct Research Foundation, or LMSDR. I just wanted to share with you, since 2005, LMSDR has been collaborating with researchers by funding research, I think you all know that, but also helping the researchers help us. From 2005 to 2017, LMSDR launched, I'll let more people in, launched a tissue drive that was led by the patients themselves in collaboration with Stanford. We collected about 500 samples plus the histories to go with them. And this was really valuable, but not only that, it was shared with Memorial Sloan Kettering, Dana-Farber, Baylor in Texas, University of Michigan, as well as researchers in the UK, France, Germany, Canada, and the Netherlands. This LMS tissue collection resulted in genomic profiles and many, many advances for the LMS community. So that's something we've already accomplished. Today, we're excited to have Taylor Cusher tell us about our new upcoming LMS partnership with Count Me In and the Broad Institute of MIT and Harvard. Taylor Cusher is a clinical project manager with Count Me In. She manages several patient-partnered research studies that generate and share clinical, genomic, and patient-reported data for rare cancers. She's passionate about engaging community participation between patients and researchers. Ms. Cusher holds a BS in kinesiology from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, and a master's degree in public health from George Washington University. Please help me give a virtual warm welcome to Taylor. Yay! All right, Taylor.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for both the invite to come and present to you all tonight, and also for all of you showing up. I'm really excited to share what we've been working on at Count Me In and our future endeavors in leiomyosarcoma. So I'm going to start sharing my screen with some slides that I have to share with you all. What I'm going to first start talking about is the Count Me In model of direct to patient and patient partnered research, and sort of why we do what we do, and how we're working to try and transform research in different cancer areas. So as many of you may know, there is a great challenge in studying patients' tumor samples. The vast majority of patients in the United States who have cancer are treated in community settings, and many of these settings are not conducting research themselves or often participating in larger research studies, which means most patients' samples and their data have not been readily available for studying. At the same time, all of the technology and social media and abilities to connect virtually online now provide us with so many opportunities to directly connect with cancer patients and partner with them in research by reaching out directly, working to build these online communities that are participating in research together. So Count Me In really wants to leverage these two aspects of making more patients' data and samples readily available for study by connecting directly with patients to enable their participation in research. And so our goal is in generating massive sets of publicly available data in cancer, and that is combinations of clinical, genomic, molecular, and patient-reported data in many different cancer types to enable researchers to find patterns in the data, because the more data there is, the better chances we have of identifying different markers in tumors or patterns in treatment information of who responds and who doesn't respond to treatments, and all kinds of things. And so our hope is and our goal is, again, to generate this data, make it publicly available, with the ultimate end goal of accelerating both discoveries in research and then eventually the development of new treatments for patients who desperately need it. And so we've been doing this in Count Me In since 2015. We started with our first project in metastatic breast cancer, which to date has enrolled over 5,600 men and women across the United States and Canada in this project. And so we are very excited about both the breadth of our work in metastatic breast cancer, meaning how many folks we have been able to engage, but also the depth, because we've been able to make some meaningful progress in research and findings there, as well as enabling data sharing so that others can advance research in metastatic breast cancer. And after seeing some initial successes in metastatic breast cancer, our team sort of asked ourselves, well, what could be next? What is the next community that could really use our help? And many of you may be familiar with Dr. Corey Painter, who is one of our lovely leaders at Count Me In. She herself is an angiosarcoma patient and thought that the angiosarcoma community would also be very impacted by this kind of model, and we could also see great success there. So in 2017, we launched a project in angiosarcoma, and to date we have almost 600 men and women with angiosarcoma across the US and Canada engaged in that work. And this is, not to the same scale as we have in metastatic breast cancer, but the patient population and those who are impacted by angiosarcoma is much smaller than those who are impacted by metastatic breast cancer. And even with a smaller group of patients engaged, we have been able to make many meaningful advances, and I'll talk about some of those in angiosarcoma as well. So with all of these patients participating, and we're trying to generate data on them, I wanted to also talk a little bit about what it means for us to be sharing data and what are some of the places that we put data to make it available to the research community. So Count Me In puts data in several places, including Seed Bioportal for cancer genomics, which is entirely publicly available. You can go to Seed Bioportal, I think it's .org, and explore all kinds of data sets there. We also share information in the National Cancer Institute's Genomic Data Commons, which is available to NIH-funded researchers and other researchers with academic credentials. And then also put our data in other places like Terra, which is something that the Broad Institute runs, and other patient and researcher-specific portals. So in all of these places, we aim to put this combination of sequencing information from tumor and saliva and blood samples, along with clinical information that we can get from medical records from our patients who are participating. And it's really this combination of understanding sort of the DNA of the tumor and the DNA of the patients, alongside the understanding of their journey of what kind of procedures did they have? Were there metastases? Where were those metastases located? What kinds of treatments did they have? What were the responses to those? It's this combination of those two factors that can be so important and helpful for the research community. It's seeing that full picture of everything from the DNA down to what was the patient's experience like. So I mentioned we've been able to make some discoveries and some impact so far in our two earliest projects, metastatic breast cancer and angiosarcoma. And so just to dive into those a little bit more. So for the metastatic breast cancer project, we have over 400 samples from more than 300 patients that we've released data on in those portals that I talked about before. There are multiple papers from researchers independent of Count Me In who have gone and used this publicly available data and made combined it with their own data sets, use it for their own research purposes, and been able to publish papers. Our team itself is working on a manuscript of some of the findings that we've discovered in the genomic analyses. And we also recently, in about the middle of 2021, translated our entire project into Spanish and made it available to those who are only Spanish speaking, because men and women of Latino descent often can be very impacted as well by breast cancer, especially metastatic breast. And we realized that was a community that we weren't yet serving with our project. So we translated it into Spanish to try and increase our reach. In angiosarcoma, we've also been able to make some great impacts. We had a publication of discoveries that we have been able to make from our team that was published in Nature Medicine in 2020. And some of these discoveries also are now being validated by clinical trials that are in progress to test what we were able to find in the research setting and see how it works with other patients. And then the same thing goes for angiosarcoma as metastatic breast cancer, where now we have many papers that have been published by researchers using our data that we've made available that are completely independent from Count Me In. And so far, we've been able to release information about over 80 samples from 60 patients into the public domain. And we're also currently working on an analysis of about 200 germline samples. And so those are sort of normal DNA samples that come from saliva or blood samples that patients have provided us. So we're taking a look more deeply at the DNA of those patients and see how it may correlate or give us point to things that need to be more deeply studied in angiosarcoma. So these are the first two projects that Count Me In launched, but since 2017, we have continued our efforts in many other spaces. So we also have projects in prostate cancer, esophageal and stomach cancer, brain cancer, and osteosarcoma. And then earlier this year, we actually opened up a portal for patients with any type of cancer to sign up for Count Me In and be able to contribute their samples, their information, their medical records, their survey data. So across these 8 studies that we have now, we have nearly 10,000 participants across all of Count Me In's efforts. And this is truly amazing, and we feel so grateful to every single person who signs up. And you can see they span the entire country. This may look a little sort of skewed towards the East Coast, but if you ever see a map of the population density of the United States, it looks very close to this. And so we're so happy for everyone who has already joined our studies and very excited to continue having that door open and continuing to invite people to come, contribute and be a part of research. Of course, I am not here today to tell you about all of the things that Count Me In is doing in other areas, but I'm here to talk to you about what we are going to be doing in leiomyosarcoma. So next year, we will be launching a project specifically in LMS. And I'm here today, and you'll probably continue hearing from me and others from our team as we move closer to this launch so we can really get the word out in the community and have folks sign up and participate in our project. So I'm going to go through what the project actually looks like, how we put it together, and what would it mean for folks to participate once the project is up and running. So first, we call all of our projects patient partnered, and that's really because from the very beginning, before we've even launched the project, we work really closely with a group of advocates, patients, caregivers, and truly amazing folks in the community to help design the study. So over the course of this year, we've been working with about 10 individuals who form our project advisory council to provide feedback on very detailed things from the types of imagery we're using on the website to the questions we're putting in the FAQ, how we should engage with the community and get the word out, and all of the new features that we are adding in. And we're so grateful to the folks who have lended their time and provided their feedback. And this process of really working with the community doesn't stop when the project launches. It definitely continues. So the goal of the LMS project will be very much along the same lines of all of Count Me In's studies in the past, which is we aim to partner with patients across the US and Canada to generate that combined group of genomic, clinical, molecular, and patient-reported data and share that with the research community. So you may be asking yourself at this point, okay, that sounds great, but what does that mean for me or someone that I know who maybe has LMS? What does that participation look like? So I'm going to go through each of these steps of consenting, responding to surveys, providing samples, and learning along the way with us, so you can really get a good understanding of what the process would look like. So participants can join, we will have a website, and participants can join the project through that website. And all of most the processes of the project will be done through that secure portal on the website. I also want to make sure to mention that anyone who has ever been diagnosed with LMS in the US or Canada can participate in this study. So the first step is really in signing up via the project website and providing consent. And so the consent form will talk through all of the benefits and the risks of the research. It allows folks to elect to share samples, whether that's saliva samples, blood samples, archive or stored tissue samples, and copies of your medical records from institutions where patients have been treated. In the consenting process, participants do get to choose a few things. Whether or not to provide a blood sample is optional. Whether or not to allow the team to request tumor samples is also optional. And a new aspect of this LMS project that we have not been able to offer for Count Me In before is that participants will be able to choose whether or not to receive any information about the sequencing of their samples directly back with them. So I'll talk more about this in a few slides, but basically we'll be able to give you a look into what we're finding from samples that you have individually contributed. The next step in participation is telling us about where you've been treated. So we asked participants to tell us all of the institutions and doctors that they've ever been treated on their journey with LMS so that we can request those medical records and to gather clinical information. And if someone has consented to providing tissue to the study, we will also go to those institutions to request that archived tumor tissue. I also want to add that all aspects of participation are optional. And so you can participate as much as you want or as little as you want. It's really up to each individual person. Another step in the participation is responding to surveys. And so initially when folks sign up, we have 2 surveys that ask about our participants' experience with LMS, things like where in the body LMS was found when you were first diagnosed, types of treatments you've had, things like that. We also have a survey to capture some initial demographic information and just some background about who you are as a person, how you found out about the study. And we do plan to add more surveys over time. Our next survey that we will be adding will be around family history of cancer. So we can try and take a look at what are some patterns perhaps, and how does that connect with the sequencing information we're able to generate. And the final step from a participant side is providing those samples. So for everyone who signs up, we will send a saliva kit, a box to collect a saliva sample at home and send it back to our lab so that we can process that and sequence it. And if you've also consented to providing a blood sample, we will similarly send a kit that can be taken to your next regular appointment and ask for a courtesy blood draw there. And then that blood can get sent right back to our lab for processing as well. And both of these things are very useful because we study these samples to better understand cancer by comparing, like I said before, the normal DNA that may be in those samples to any tumor DNA that we are able to get from tumor samples that the project is able to collect. But even on their own, as you saw with our example in angiosarcoma, understanding the germline or the normal DNA from participants also may hold clues that could really help spur research. And we like to make sure that participation in the project continues to be a two-way street over time. So we do our best to provide participants with regular updates about the status of our research and our efforts and share any discoveries, whether that's providing back a pie chart of here's some information we've learned from a survey, or hey, we've reached X number of people signed up for the project or tumor samples, or in the more long-term, publications and studies and data releases that we're able to make. We also may reach out to participants in the future to participate in focus groups, or like I said, provide additional feedback on how the project is going, how you feel about it, if there are ways that we could improve. And the project will also have profiles on social media where you can follow us and to get regular updates as well. So I want to talk about the two other benefits of participation that I mentioned before, of learning more and hearing more about the results of sequencing information, which are something that's new to Count Me In that we've been designing for this project. So there are two opportunities here. The first is learning more about the DNA from a participant's tumor samples. So if a participant chooses in the consent process to share those archive or stored tumor samples with the project, and we are able to get those samples and successfully sequence them, we will be able to share back an individual letter that tells a participant what we learned from the genomics of that tumor. This information is intended to highlight how these samples are contributing to research and may not, and most likely will not, have any implications for treatment or prognosis. So this is different than sort of other, perhaps clinical testing that may be done to help identify treatments that a patient may be on. This is really like how are your samples contributing to research? The second opportunity is learning more about normal or germline DNA, and that's your inherited DNA that you've received from your family and you pass on to your family. And so the project is partnering with Invitae to provide the germline testing and genetic counseling for anyone who is interested. So participants who are interested in getting this testing and genetic counseling to understand the results of the test would provide an additional saliva sample to Invitae, thanks to our partnership with them, and then be able to talk to a genetic counselor about what the results mean for you or your family. We're really excited about getting into offering these benefits to participants in the project, and also adapting them over time as we learn more about how does this work, how do participants feel about receiving this information, and how can we make it a better process for everyone involved. I also just want to highlight here, unfortunately, there are some regulatory restrictions around these two aspects. Neither is available to anyone in Canada, and the learning about your tumor samples is not available for folks who live in New York State. There's unfortunately a lot of red tape around both of those places, which we can talk about more if we need to, but we have done our best, and unfortunately 49 states minus Canada is the best we can get for both of these things. So that's what the project looks like in terms of participating and how someone can contribute, but also what they will get back. So what does this mean? Where do we stand? When is this project coming? How have we been getting there? So like I mentioned, earlier this year, Count Me In established our Project Advisory Council with patients in LMS, and we began internally having a lot of conversations on how we would stand up these processes to share sequencing information back with participants. And over the course of this year, we've continued working with the PAC and our internal teams to build the project website with feedback, establish these processes, test these processes of sharing sequencing information with participants, and knowing exactly what that will look like. We plan to launch the project early next year, which again will allow anyone diagnosed with LMS in the US and Canada to join the study and start responding to surveys. It will then take us a few months to begin acquiring samples, medical records, and by late next year and then ongoing, we will conduct that genomic sequencing on saliva, blood, and tumor samples. We will request and receive many medical records from institutions all over, And we'll begin compiling that data to share it with the research community, share it back with our participants so that they know what we've been working on and what we've been able to find, and really, try to continue pushing forward research and discoveries in LMS. So if you're interested, I know Sharon has already linked to our website on her website. So here's another plug though, where right now you can find us at joincountmein.org/LMS. We have just a brief one-page website right now where you can sign up for a mailing list to be alerted when the project launches early next year. And there's also a handful of frequently asked questions that we've already put there to give you a little bit more information about the project, most of which are things that I've covered here today. There's a huge team behind this effort. Even all of these names and faces that are pictured and written here aren't everyone who's involved, but it truly takes a whole community to put together this kind of work and support this work. And so I just want to say I am here, as the face of Count Me In today, but there are many other folks behind me working really closely in partnership with me to make sure that we can make all of this happen. And at any point in time, anyone can reach out to info@lmsproject.org with any questions. This goes for before the project is launched and once we're up and running. We really do our best to be very responsive to any questions that come in and make sure that if folks are deciding whether or not to participate, they feel really good and they feel like they have all of their questions asked before they sign those consent forms, and so graciously donate their information, their medical records, and everything to us. So I wanted to make sure you all had that information, but I know now we're going to do some Q&A. Right, Sharon?
Yes, we are. So you can put your questions in the chat box and we can read them. Or if you're not shy, you can unmute yourself and ask questions. I have a first question. I get to go first. How do you keep patients' identity anonymous with all this data and medical records?
Yes, that is a great question. So whenever we share public data publicly, we go through a rigorous process to de-identify samples. So all of our participants are assigned a unique participant ID that's sort of in our systems that we use to keep track of the data as we're sequencing and processing medical records. And publicly, we apply a different ID. So we have a totally separate anonymous ID that is applied to everyone's samples and information. We also go through a process of cleaning the data and sort of taking out any identifier. So for example, date of birth or date of diagnosis, those things maybe individually could be very identifying. And instead, when we share data publicly, we translate that into something that is more general. So for date of diagnosis, we will give a 5-year age range of when someone was diagnosed, or maybe a date you started a treatment. We anchor that against the date of diagnosis. And so we say, okay, this person started treatment A 247 days after they were diagnosed. And that way we're not giving months, dates, years, institutions, things like that that could be very identifying about someone's samples. I will also add that for the genomic information, which obviously is incredibly personal, it is information about your DNA. The raw information about DNA is only put in the Genomic Data Commons, which is the repository we use that is maintained by the National Cancer Institute at the NIH. And that one is not publicly available and only researchers can gain access to that. So the data is both de-identified and also put behind very stringent protections that the NCI maintains.
We have a few in the chat box. So someone asked, if you live in New York, can you still participate?
Yes, definitely. So if you live in New York, you can still participate. Your samples and all of the information that you contribute will certainly still add up and contribute to our research. We just will be unable to tell you anything about your individual participation back with you.
And that goes for Canadians too?
Yes.
So New Yorkers and Canadians can't get the information back, but they can give the information and donate it to science.
Exactly.
Would the results that New Yorkers aren't getting, would they be the same as genomic testing that we would have had at Sloan Kettering or through another institution?
Yeah, it could be very, very similar. That genomic testing, it depends on the type of testing that they were doing. You know, we will be conducting a panel test, so we'll be only looking at a subset of genes when we're doing that return. And so testing at Memorial Sloan Kettering may have looked at a same panel, a different panel. They'll be similar, but not necessarily exactly the same.
Thank you.
Well, on that note, there's another question. If our tumor was from a previous, wait a minute. If our tumor has already been genetically sequenced, are you still interested in the sample?
Yes, most definitely. We are also interested, and we'll be releasing surveys where if you've received genomic testing, you can tell us about the results you received, but we are still very interested in gaining access to that tumor sample for our team and doing our own sequencing. That way, the sequencing data that we have on every participant or every tumor sample is sort of standard across the board, has been done, you know, in our lab under the same conditions.
Okay. Someone asked if they've had radiation therapy, do you still want their sample?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
We want all the samples we can get.
So even no matter what treatments they've had, chemotherapy, radiation, you still want their sample?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Do institutions like University of Michigan participate to supply samples that they accumulate?
So we, as I mentioned, our project is, we are direct to patient. So if a participant in the LMS project has been treated at UMichigan in this example, we will reach out to them and we will ask for any samples for that participant. We don't sort of directly collaborate with institutions to have them send batches of samples our way. It's really based on what individual patients sign up for the study as participants.
Okay, and Harriet wants to know, you will search for the tumor sample, correct?
Yes, exactly. Our team at Count Me In will take care of hunting down medical records and acquiring all of those, searching for tumor samples, making all the follow-up calls to the pathology departments and requests. Yeah, we take on all of that.
Okay, and I just want to add, some people might have given a tumor sample to another research project. You probably have several tissue block samples for each tumor. So it's not uncommon for a tumor that's like 6 centimeters to have 20 blocks, just so you know. Let's see. My son just recently passed from LMS. He had genomic and DNA testing. Can you accept tumor samples that are stored from his from her deceased son?
Yes, this is a great question. And this is something that we are not currently able to do, but we are hoping to enable. We are working on some pilot programs right now to work with folks who have lost someone to a disease like angiosarcoma or osteosarcoma or LMS to be able to get samples for folks who have passed. It's a little bit more complicated from a regulatory perspective because that person didn't consent to the research before they passed. But we're doing some testing to figure out how we can enable this because we know that the more samples we can have to contribute to this research, the better it will be.
Okay, yeah, that would be wonderful if people could do that on behalf of their loved one. Yeah. Paula wants to know, how can I sign up for this?
Well, first you can sign up for the mailing list, which again, you can find at joincountmein.org/LMS, and then wait patiently for us to launch next year.
So somewhere in the spring of next year, yes? Not
Yes.
fall. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
And also, if you go to the LMSDR website under research, we have a page there for Count Me In, and you can also sign up there. Okay, let's see. My son had ALL. I have LMS with the TP53 mutation. Would Count Me In be interested in genetic testing for him and my other children? He and I are the first in our family to be diagnosed with cancer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a great question, and something that we we'll try to study more as we get into the survey that I mentioned about asking folks for their family history of cancer. I would say in this particular case, of course, we would love to have you as someone with LMS sign up for the LMS project. But if your son is also interested in contributing to research, he could sign up for our count just at joincountmein.org, our all cancers study. And so we can sort of start to piece together family histories and patterns of cancer incidence in different families.
That's right. You're taking participants from all cancers now, right?
Yes.
But LMS is the only project where you're going to get feedback back about your sequencing, unless you live in New York and Canada.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
We had that down. If we have more than one surgery, do you want tumor samples from all our surgeries?
Yes, we definitely try to acquire tumor samples from multiple procedures. Not necessarily all. It depends on, if they were close in time to one another. Maybe you had a treatment that was different between the two. There is definitely interest, as you may have noticed in some of our numbers from angiosarcoma and metastatic breast cancer. There's a lot of interest in acquiring multiple tumor samples from the same patient and seeing how the tumor DNA may have changed over time or after different treatments.
Yeah, it's a lot of information there on that. Someone wants to know, what is molecular data? I also want to know, hand in hand with that, is what is the information we're going to get back on the sequencing, and is it going to make any sense to us?
Yes. Well, I'll tackle that second one first, which is we're working very hard to make sure that it makes sense. We are working with a great clinical pathologist at Boston Children's, actually, because who will sign out all of these letters about the information that we found in our tumor sequencing that go directly to patients. And we're trying very hard to make sure that it is understandable, that there is sort of evidence and background of, if we say, okay, there we noticed a variation in this particular gene. What does this gene mean? What does this gene do? What do we not know about this gene yet? And compile that in a very easily understandable letter. But again, our work is always trying to make sure that our participants are happy and like participating in our work. And so if there are questions about what you get back in your letter, we are here to answer any and all of those. So the first question, to go back to that, around what is molecular data? So molecular data also refers to different types of other sequencing that we will be doing for research. And we don't only look at DNA from tumor samples, we also look at RNA from tumor samples. We also will look at like the tumor sample slides that come with the tumor samples and sort of the stains and how they react to different chemistries. And in blood samples, we also look for different types of other markers. For example, not applicable in LMS, but applicable in our prostate cancer project, we look for, like PSA values, if that's something folks are familiar with in the blood. So molecular sort of covers the other types of testing and the other types of analysis that we may do that is not strictly sequencing DNA.
Great. Harriet wants to know, I had genetic testing with Invite, is that how you say it? You want that information?
Yes, we are happy to receive any and all. If you had that genetic testing done under the guidance of your care team, it may also already be in your medical record. It may also be, so it may be something that we already receive and getting copies of medical records. But again, we're trying to put together the most comprehensive sets of data we can for each individual person and each individual disease area that we're working in. So genetic testing information we will definitely take.
All right. So back to the results that we're going to be able to get, unless we live in New York or Canada. Can we use those findings to better guide us with chemotherapy treatments?
Yeah, that's a great question. So these findings and the information that we share will most likely, I'm trying to give the right amount of caveat, more than likely not guide you to different chemotherapies. Really what it is going to showcase is what we found in a tumor sample and how it is contributing to research. So as I mentioned before, the information that you receive back may say you have variations in these genes in your tumor. And most of the genes that we identify will be things that that the research community doesn't readily understand about LMS or maybe about cancer generally. And that's why we need to be doing work like we're doing at Count Me In and sharing data so that we can better understand what those variations mean in those genes. It's not going to be something, we're not at the point yet where we understand these variations in genes well enough to be able to pair them with particular treatments or make recommendations about your clinical care.
Okay. I suppose if you find mutations, you could always take it to your own doctor and see if there's anything indicated by it. Any certain chemotherapy that might be matched. Yes? Yeah.
Definitely possible. Yep.
So it's a possibility. Anybody else? Catherine, you need to unmute yourself.
So if a tissue block was sent to the Cancer Cell Line Project earlier in 2021, can that donation be counted? I mean, it looks like there's other steps, so I don't know.
It was sent to the Broad Institute.
Oh, to the Broad Institute. Yes, excuse me.
Yes. So in order to sort of be counted, we would still need someone, the individual to sign up and consent to being part of the study. We could certainly work with first probably the institution where the procedure was performed to see if there's any sample left there for us to acquire. And if not, we can certainly call upon our friends and coworkers over at the Cancer Cell Line Factory and see if there is material that we could use for Count Me In.
Okay.
Anybody else? Oh, someone asked Marge, when would we be seeing results from this research?
Yes, so I'll talk about first individual results that we may be able to share back, and then I'll talk about sort of bigger picture like discoveries and sharing data. So in terms of receiving back individual information about what we can find from sequencing, that will take several months from the time you sign up to the time that we are able to, acquire medical records, tissue samples, send them to sequencing. Just for context for everyone, the sequencing that we do spends about 8 to 12 weeks in the lab going through a series of processes before it is complete and comes out with data on the other end. So that alone, can be 2 to 3 months just for sequencing to occur and for us to get data from there. So for an individual, it could be, anywhere from maybe 6 to 8 months between signing up and actually hearing more back from us about what we were able to find in our sequencing information. In terms of bigger picture results, we hope to share data on a very regular basis with the research community. We aim to do that at least once a year and make that available. It is then sort of, on for everyone else to take up that data, study it, use it in ongoing studies, and try and make discoveries from it. So we will keep people abreast and aware of everything that we're doing, but this is certainly a project that we're in for, the long haul, and it will take a good amount of time to make both individual results available, but also more broad discoveries in LMS. Oh, Sharon, I think you're on mute.
How much does this cost the patient?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
And where does the money come from to do all this research?
Thank you.
Yes, so Count Me In is supported by, of course, we are part of the Broad Institute. We are also a part of the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. We also receive philanthropic funding as well to support our efforts. The LMS project itself and also our project in osteosarcoma are recipients of a grant from the National Cancer Institute. And that grant is very much focused on enabling patient participation in cancer research that uses genomic information. And so there are other recipients of the same grant across the US doing this in slightly different variations, but we're very excited to have the support of the NCI behind this effort and our project in osteosarcoma.
I have to say, folks, we're very lucky that LMS got this grant. So I hope everybody participates and donates this data to researchers who could take it and use it. Since there's not a lot of us, it's hard to find that much data in one spot. So this is a great opportunity for us. David asks, will the type of genetic mutation be identified, i.e. fusion?
That is a great question, and one that I would need to take back to some folks on my team. I don't quite have the expertise to answer that one for you there, David.
Okay, and let's see. Is this testing similar to Natera testing? And if you don't know what Natera testing is, I can answer that.
That would be great, Sharon.
So Natera is a biotech firm in California, not too far from where I live, and they are doing circulating DNA tests. So they're taking your tumor, the patient's tumor, and comparing it to a new blood sample and seeing if any of that similar DNA from the tumor is in your blood. So they could tell you if maybe a tumor has returned, or maybe the amount has gone down because you're in a treatment that's really helping. They also have another test where they do sequencing.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you for that background, I appreciate it. So this testing that we will be providing information back on, the sequencing, it's called whole exome sequencing. And that may be similar to the second piece that you mentioned, Sharon, whatever sequencing testing Natera does. We will be looking for circulating tumor DNA from any blood samples that we are provided with, but that will strictly be on the research side. We won't be able to provide results back about anything that we find in the circulating tumor DNA from blood samples. The return of information is strictly limited to tumor samples that, sort of physical tumor samples that we receive from institutions.
Anybody else? You're going to have questions after we get off.
And you can always email them to me and the team. We'll get back to you.
Okay, great. I think that might be nice. Peggy, you wanna say what you wrote? Where's Peggy?
No, I'm here.
here.
Okay, you want to read your comment?
Oh, I just want to thank you because, you know, it's not, it's nice to see somebody take an interest in leiomyosarcoma. Research is what we need. So it sounds like a win-win.
Yes, thank you, Peggy. Yeah, it certainly will be a win-win, and also we can't do it without the partnership of folks like you who sign up and, you know, like I said before, make that gracious contribution of sharing your medical records, your samples, your time, your energy, your experiences with us, and that's what makes the work possible.
Taylor, what if you have only the first surgery and that was 8 years ago?
Yeah,
I mean, we could give records, but what about a sample?
Yeah, so we will try and track down those samples. Many institutions will keep samples in storage for at least 10 years, if not longer. Some institutions, it depends on, you know, their own personal internal policies. So something that was 8 years ago very well may likely still be in storage for us to receive.
Great.
Yeah, I had that question too, because I'm a 20-year survivor. I have a question. Is there any reason not to do this? I guess if you don't want a blood draw, or you don't
But
want
again,
to put into a test tube.
right, the blood draw is optional. You know, I mean, everyone gets to make their own decisions. Our consent form is very long and many pages and goes through all of the possible pros and cons. I know I answered your question earlier, Sharon, about de-identifying, and we have many safeguards and do all of the things that we can. But even though this is very low risk of engaging with this type of research, it's not without risk. And, you know, each person needs to weigh those pros and cons when they join the study.
Okay, great. So someone wants your email address, if you could type that in. Yep. And we also have it in this presentation, which was recorded. So I want to, any other questions before I close the session?
I just want to say thank you. And I think it's exciting too that we're going to be getting data back, both on ourselves and on what we can do to help LMS. So I'm so happy that LMS was chosen for this. Thank you.
And I think it was chosen because we have such a active group. You know, we participate a lot in the Facebook group and all sorts of projects. We had a tissue drive before that was very successful. So it's because of you folks and how well you respond to these kind of opportunities that I think we were selected.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you to you. All right, Taylor, thank you so much. And if you just put in your, oh, you did? Yes, you did. Yep. You put in your email address. So I just want to thank you on behalf of all of us. This is a great opportunity. And I hope a lot of good information comes out of this.
Yes, well, thank you so much again for the opportunity to come and speak with you all tonight, and for all of the great questions as well. We're really, really excited.
All right, thank you. Everybody, give her a warm yay. All right, everybody, have a great time. Bye-bye.